No. Before your world comes crashing down, let me explain. Mushrooms belong to an entirely separate kingdom called fungi, which is plural for fungus.
Hello.
Yep, fungus has a kingdom of its own. So all living organisms in this world are categorized into kingdoms based on certain criteria like their cellular structures, mode of nutrition and reproduction, bodily organizations, evolutionary relationships, to name a few. Right now, for the sake of simplicity, we'll just consider the 5-kingdom classification as proposed by the American ecologist Robert Harding Whittaker in 1969. He separated all living creatures in this world into 5 kingdoms. Monera, which includes mostly bacteria, Protista, which are mostly algae, and amoeba. Then comes fungi, in which the mushrooms are the most popular members, Plantae, with all the plants, and finally, Animalia, which includes me and you and all other animals. So why is mushroom not a plant? We'll have to understand this by first establishing the basic differences between plants and fungi. The first basic difference lies in their mode of nutrition. Plants, as we all know, have chlorophyll that enable them to perform photosynthesis, through which they make their own food. This means that plants are autotrophs. Fungi lack chlorophyll. You've all seen them. They're not green. This means they can't perform photosynthesis, which means no manufacturing their own food. Therefore, fungi, like us citizens of Animalia kingdom, have to depend on other organisms for food. So fungi and Animalia are both heterotrophs. That is, we can't manufacture our own food. And I don't mean like cook our own food. I mean actually make our own food with inorganic matter using our own body organs. Now, depending on their mode of nutrition, fungi can be of 3 types. Number 1, saprophytes, those that feed on dead and decaying organic matter, like mushrooms. Number 2, parasites, those that survive on other living hosts and derive nutrition from them, often causing damage or disease to the host in the long run. For example, the ringworm causing mold like fungi. Bet you didn't know that. I didn't either. I always thought ringworms were caused by flea bites or something. Anyways, the third type are symbionts, those that form mutualistic relationships with other organisms that are often beneficial. For example, bet you'll never even guess this. Lichens, those crusty, leafy creatures that you find growing on tree barks. They're actually a hybrid colony formed by a beneficial relationship between a fungus that provides structure and protection and an algae or a cyanobacteria that provide food to the colony via photosynthesis. A fun, unrelated fact is that lichens are pollution indicators. So if an area is known to be highly polluted, you won't find any lichens there. Getting back to the topic, when it comes to structural differences, plants have a well-established root and shoot system that make up their main structural and functional components. Fungi do not have this root and shoot system. They have thread-like filaments called hyphae, which is the fungal structural unit, just as cells are the structural units of plants and animals. These hyphae form a dense network called mycelia, which form the true body of a fungus, and this true body often remains hidden underground or under the substrate that they're growing on. This mycelia is responsible for absorbing nutrients, and to better understand, you could think of it as the root-like counterpart of plant root system. The observable above-ground parts that you often see in mushrooms are actually just the fruiting bodies responsible for reproduction and not the shoot system. In plants, the counterparts are the fruits themselves. Now, at the microscopic level, both plant cells and fungal cells have cell walls. Remember cell walls? No? I thought so. So this is a cell. We have the cell membrane, the mitochondria, which is, say it with me, the powerhouse of the cell.
Hooray!
Then the nucleus, the brain of the cell. The endoplasmic reticulum, vacuoles, ribosomes, other cell organelles, and all of these lie in the cytoplasm. Then enclosing all of this, including the cell membrane, is the cell wall. The composition of this cell wall differs between fungi and plants. In plants, the cell wall is composed of a complex carbohydrate called cellulose, which, by the way, is the most abundant carbohydrate on Earth.
What?
So if you're eating salads and saying, I don't eat carbs, just, you're still eating carbs. Anyways, in fungal cells, this cell wall is composed of a different complex carbohydrate called chitin, which again, by the way, is the second most abundant carbohydrate on Earth after cellulose. So that's about 3 basic differences that clearly separates fungi from plants.
Hooray!
These two kingdoms also differ in the ecological roles that they play. Plants, as we all know, are the basic foundation of all food chains on Earth. They are the producers. Fungi, on the other hand, are actually decomposers that break down dead and decaying matter and recycle the nutrients back into the environment. Now, about reproduction, the differences can get a bit ambiguous because plants and fungi can reproduce via both sexual and asexual methods. Asexually, fungi reproduce via reproductive unit called spores, or by other methods like fragmentation and budding. Plants reproduce asexually by vegetative propagation via cuttings, tubers, rhizomes, or bulbs. But in lower plants like ferns and mosses, it happens through spores too. So there lies the ambiguity. However, differences in sexual reproduction are clear. In plants, you find that the male and female organs and the male and female sex cells are separate, but in fungi, there is no male or female. Let's see it this way. In plants, sexual reproduction is like a wedding. There is a bride, which is the egg, and a groom, which is the sperm or pollen. They meet during fertilization, which leads to the formation of a baby, which is called the zygote or the embryo. The baby is then protected and nourished inside a cradle, which is the seed. In fungi, sexual reproduction is more like a handshake between two compatible partners. There is no bride or groom, only two mating types, indicated as a plus or a minus sign. They first join hands, which is like plasmogamy or cytoplasmic fusion. Later, they exchange their ID cards, which represents karyogamy or nuclear fusion. Very quickly after that, They agree to produce many tiny flyers which they throw everywhere, which are the spores that spread everywhere after their union. So that is that. Fungi, ladies and gentlemen, therefore deserve a kingdom of their own because they're weird and not at all like plants. And if you have any further doubts, don't ask me. Before you leave, here are some notable figures in the kingdom of fungi that you come across almost every day. First in the Hall of Fame, we have Penicillium notatum, the source of the wonder drug antibiotic penicillin. Second, we have common mushrooms, Agaricus bisporus, button mushroom, Lentinula etodus, shiitake mushroom, Pleurotus austriatus, oyster mushroom, this, enoki mushroom, and last but not the least, we have the common baking yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And remember guys, all mushrooms are fungi. All fungi are not mushrooms.